Arkansas on the fateful morning of April 12th, 2015. No one could have predicted that a horrific tragedy was waiting to unfold, a tragedy that would shake this peaceful city to its very core. Johnny Ray Baxter, a successful 45-year-old real estate broker, should have been enjoying a peaceful Sunday morning. Instead, his lifeless body lay motionless on the bedroom floor, surrounded by a pool of dark red blood. The room looked as if a devastating storm had just swept through. Furniture overturned, shattered glass, and blood spattered on the walls like a gruesome painting. Michael Everly, the 52-year-old neighbor and retired teacher, could never forget the horrifying scene he discovered that morning. Asked by Darling Baxter, Johnny Ray's wife, to check on things because she was out of town, Michael had unwittingly walked into a nightmare. His calls echoed through the eerily silent house. When he opened the door to the master bedroom, Michael recoiled in horror at the sight before him. With trembling hands, he hurriedly called 911. His voice choked with emotion as he tried to describe what he had just witnessed. News of Johnny Ray's death spread as quickly as a wildfire. Reporters from local TV stations KFSM and KWA flocked to the scene, cameras and microphones ready to capture every detail of this shocking murder. Neighbors gathered on Maple Street, whispering about the horrific event that had occurred right in the middle of their peaceful neighborhood. When detectives Sarah Mitchell Kinsey and James Carter arrived at the scene, they knew this would be a complex case. Sarah, 38, was known for her sharp mind and attention to the smallest details. James, 42, was known for his methodical approach. Together, they formed a powerful investigative team, determined to uncover the truth behind Johnny Ray's tragic death. As the detectives entered the house, they could sense the heavy atmosphere of tragedy. Signs of a struggle were evident everywhere. Chairs overturned in the living room, glass shards glittering in the morning sunlight, and the kitchen looking as if it had just been through an earthquake. But nothing could have prepared them for the scene in the master bedroom. Johnny Ray lay there, his body brutally beaten, a blood-soaked hammer lying nearby. The detectives immediately recognized that this was not a spontaneous killing. The brutality of the attack suggested an act of intense hatred and anger. But who could have hated Johnny Ray this much? What secrets had this beloved man been hiding? As the forensics team began their work collecting evidence, detectives Mitchell Kinsey and Carter started compiling a list of people to interrogate. First on the list was Darling Baxter, the victim's wife. At 34, Darling was a successful accountant, known for her strong and decisive personality. But her past also held challenges, becoming a mother at 16 and having to work as a stripper to support her daughter Lily. When Darling was brought in for questioning the next day, she appeared calm, but was clearly grieving. She said she had been visiting her sister Nancy in Little Rock at the time of the murder. Photos and text messages seemed to confirm her story, but the detectives were still suspicious. They had noticed tension in Darling's voice when she spoke about Johnny Ray and Lily's recent changes. The investigation also revealed that the relationship between Darling and Johnny Ray was not as perfect as it appeared on the surface. Friends and neighbors had noticed increasing tension in the Baxter household. Darling admitted that they had been arguing more recently, mainly about Johnny Ray's work and the time he spent away from home. But were these disagreements enough to turn into deadly violence? As the detectives searched Darling's car and belongings, they found a diary containing expressions of her frustration and suspicion. The handwritten entries depicted a woman drowning in stress and emotional pain. But did this make Darling a murderer? Meanwhile, the detectives' attention turned to Lily Adams, Darling's 18-year-old daughter and Johnny Ray's stepdaughter. A freshman psychology student at the University of Arkansas, Lily was described as intelligent, outgoing, and ambitious. But as the detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a shocking secret. Lily and Johnny Ray had been having a secret affair. When Lily was brought in for questioning, she admitted to the relationship, saying it had started about 6 months ago. She described feeling lonely and confused, and Johnny Ray had been there to comfort her. But now she felt guilty and distressed, especially seeing her mother becoming increasingly tense. Lily said she had met with Johnny Ray the night before he died. They had argued about their relationship and its impact on the family. She claimed she had then gone to a friend's house to study for midterms and stayed there until early morning on April 12th. The friend confirmed this story, but the detectives were still suspicious about the emotional turmoil Lily was going through. As the investigation continued, an unexpected figure emerged: Diddy Baxter, Johnny Ray's ex-wife. At 46, Diddy was known for her hot temper and aggressive behavior. She had never accepted Johnny Ray's marriage to Darling and was still bitter about their divorce. When Diddy was brought in for questioning, she was defiant and uncooperative. She admitted that their relationship had been tumultuous, but denied any involvement in Johnny Ray's death. However, as the detectives dug deeper, they discovered that Diddy had recently learned about the relationship between Johnny Ray and Lily. This had infuriated her, even calling Johnny Ray a disgraceful man in front of friends and colleagues. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, detectives Mitchell Kinsey and Carter felt they were getting closer to the truth. But then an unexpected clue appeared, completely changing the direction of the investigation. On April 17th, a jogger discovered a suspicious plastic bag in a park near Beaver Lake. Inside were a bloody shirt and a pair of gloves. Forensic tests confirmed that the blood on the shirt was Johnny Ray's, and the fingerprints on the gloves were not his. This breakthrough forced the detectives to revisit their entire list of suspects and recheck their alibis. They carefully examined surveillance footage from the park and surrounding areas. And then they discovered something shocking. A figure resembling Lily Adams was seen entering the park late on the night of the murder. When Lily was brought in for a second interrogation, she appeared noticeably more anxious. She admitted to going to the park to clear her head, but claimed to know nothing about the bloody items. The detectives pressed for more details, but Lily stuck to her story. But then, another discovery shook the investigation. Hair fibers on the gloves matched Darling Baxter's DNA. Suddenly, the possibility that both mother and daughter were involved in the crime became very likely. When Darling was called in for questioning again, she appeared calm but worried. She admitted to knowing about the gloves, but insisted she had nothing to do with the murder. She said she had worn the gloves while gardening and couldn't explain why they were near Beaver Lake. As the detectives continued to dig, they uncovered a decisive clue. A surveillance camera from a nearby gas station had captured footage of Darling driving towards Beaver Lake late on the night of the murder. This completely contradicted her previous statement and shattered the alibi she had provided. With this new evidence in hand, detectives Mitchell Kinsey and Carter knew they were closer to uncovering the truth. They decided to confront Darling one last time, hoping the pressure would cause her to break down and confess. On the morning of April 22nd, as sunlight filtered through the trees in Fayetteville, the detectives and a team of police officers arrived at Darling's office. The air was tense as they entered the building, knowing that the next few moments would determine the fate of the case. Darling was sitting at her desk when the police appeared. She looked up, her face calm, but her eyes betraying a hint of worry. Detective Mitchell Kinsey stepped forward, her voice firm as she announced, "Darling Baxter, we are arresting you for the first-degree murder of Johnny Ray Baxter." For a moment, Darling froze in place. Then, as if a dam had burst, she began shaking her head violently, her voice trembling. No, you don't understand. I didn't kill him. I loved him." As the police moved to handcuff Darling, she began to sob uncontrollably. Her colleagues stood around, shocked and confused by the scene unfolding before them. Some whispered in disbelief, unable to believe that the woman they knew and trusted could commit such a terrible crime. As Darling was led out of the building, a crowd of reporters and curious onlookers had gathered outside. Cameras flashed and microphones were thrust towards her as she was placed in the waiting police car. Darling bowed her head, trying to hide her face from the cameras, but unable to conceal the desperation and fear in her eyes. News of the arrest spread through Fayetteville like a tsunami. Local TV stations interrupted regular programming to report on the latest developments. The headline, "Wife Arrested for Husband's Murder," appeared on the front page of the Fayetteville Observer. The community fell into a state of collective shock, unable to believe that such a tragedy could happen right in their midst. At the police station, Darling was taken to the interrogation room. Detectives Mitchell, Kinsey, and Carter sat across from her, their eyes steady and determined. They laid out the evidence on the table: the video from the gas station, the DNA test results, the inconsistencies in her statements. "Darling," Detective Mitchell Kinsey said, her voice calm but firm, "we know you lied about where you were the night Johnny Ray was killed. We have evidence placing you near the crime scene. This is your chance to tell the truth. What happened that night?" For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Darling just stared at the two detectives, her eyes red and brimming with tears. Then, as if a dam had burst, she began to speak, her voice choked with emotion. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I just wanted to talk to him. I found out about his relationship with Lily. How could he? She was our daughter." Darling continued to recount the heartbreaking story of how she had confronted Johnny Ray on that fateful night. She had driven to the house, her mind reeling with anger and pain. The confrontation quickly escalated into a fierce argument. "He wasn't sorry," Darling sobbed. "He said he loved Lily, that they would be together. I couldn't bear it. I just remember grabbing the hammer. Everything after that is a blur." As Darling finished her confession, the room fell into silence. Detectives Mitchell, Kinsey, and Carter looked at each other, feeling both relieved to have solved the case and saddened by the tragedy of the Baxter family. In the days that followed, the Fayetteville community struggled to come to terms with the shock of the Baxter case. Friends and neighbors of the Baxter family gathered to share their grief and support each other. Lily, now without both her stepfather and mother, faced the terrible emotional burden of guilt and sorrow. The trial of Darling Baxter took place that summer, drawing attention from across the state of Arkansas. The courtroom was packed each day as the shocking details of the case were revealed. The prosecutor described Darling as a betrayed wife, pushed to the brink of madness by the dual betrayal of her husband and daughter. The defense attorney argued that this was a crime of passion, not a premeditated murder. After 2 weeks of intense trial, the jury took only 3 days to reach a verdict. They found Darling Baxter guilty of first-degree murder. As the verdict was read, Darling stood silently, her face blank as if she had accepted her fate. Judge Lisa Everly sentenced Darling to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As she read the sentence, she said, "Mrs. Baxter, your actions not only took your husband's life, but also destroyed your family. This is a tragedy for all involved." As Darling was led out of the courtroom, she glanced one last time towards Lily. The young woman sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. In the exchange of looks between mother and daughter was an ocean of sorrow, regret, and things left unsaid. As the prison doors closed behind Darling, a tragic chapter in Fayetteville's history came to a close. But the consequences of the case would reverberate for years to come. The community would always remember Johnny Ray Baxter, the talented man with the bright smile who met such a tragic end. They would remember Darling, the strong woman who was pushed to the brink of despair. And they would remember Lily, the young woman who unwittingly became the center of a terrible tragedy. For detectives Mitchell, Kinsey, and Carter, the Baxter case would always be a reminder of the complexity of human nature and the devastating consequences of secrets kept too long. They knew that behind every closed door could lie heartbreaking stories, dark secrets waiting to be revealed. As twilight fell over Fayetteville at the end of the trial day, the city seemed to sink into a somber mood. Street lamps flickered to life, illuminating the quiet streets. Somewhere in the darkness, the muffled sobs of a young woman could be heard, the cries of Lily Adams, who had lost everything in one fateful night. And as darkness enveloped the city, the story of Johnny Ray Baxter, Darling, and Lily became a painful cautionary tale about the destructive power of family secrets and the tragic consequences of letting emotions overrule reason. It was a story that would be told for many years to come, a reminder that behind closed doors and fake smiles, the most horrific tragedies can lurk. As the months passed, the Fayetteville community gradually recovered from the shock of the Baxter case. However, the echoes of the tragedy remained, simmering like a wound that had not fully healed. Lily Adams, now the focus of unwanted attention, decided to leave the University of Arkansas. She transferred to a college in another state, hoping to find a fresh start. But memories of her relationship with Johnny Ray and the image of her convicted mother still haunted her every night. In the Arkansas State Prison, Darling Baxter slowly adapted to her new life. She participated in rehabilitation programs and began writing a diary, trying to understand what had happened and why she had acted the way she did. Each night, she looked out the prison window, wondering how Lily was doing and if there would ever be a day when her daughter would forgive her. Detective Sarah Mitchell Kinsey, who had led the investigation, often thought about the Baxter case. It became a valuable lesson in her career, reminding her that behind every case are real people with complex stories. She began giving talks at the police academy, sharing lessons from this case. A year after the case, a local journalist named Mark Thompson decided to write a book about the Baxter case. He began interviewing people involved, from the Baxter's neighbors to Johnny Ray's colleagues at the real estate company. During his research, Mark uncovered shocking new details. He found out that Johnny Ray had plans to leave Darling in Fayetteville with Lily. They had booked plane tickets to California and rented an apartment in San Francisco. This plan explained why Johnny Ray had been working late many nights. He was preparing for a new life. Mark also managed to interview Diddy Baxter, Johnny Ray's ex-wife. In a tearful interview, Diddy revealed that she had known about the relationship between Johnny Ray and Lily before it was discovered. She had tried to dissuade Johnny Ray, but he refused to listen. When Mark's book was published, it sparked a new wave of controversy in Fayetteville. Many felt that it had reopened old wounds, while others believed it helped them better understand the tragedy that had occurred. Lily, when contacted for comment on the book, only gave a brief statement through her lawyer. "I hope people will respect my privacy and allow me to continue my life peacefully." Meanwhile, in prison, Darling read the book with deep pain and regret. She wrote a long letter to Lily, apologizing for everything that had happened and expressing hope that one day they could mend their relationship. However, the letter was never sent. Lily had requested not to receive any communication from her mother. 2 years after the case, an unexpected event shook Fayetteville once again. One morning, people discovered that Lily Adams had returned to the city. She was seen standing in front of the old Baxter family home, now sold to another family. Lily stood there for a long time, staring at the house with an unreadable expression. Then, without a word, she turned and drove away. But before leaving, she left a small bouquet of flowers at the front door. This action by Lily sparked much speculation in the community. Had she forgiven? Was she seeking closure? Or was it just a way to say a final goodbye to the past? No one knew for sure, and Lily remained silent. But that action seemed to mark a turning point in the Baxter family story. It suggested that, although the wounds were still there, perhaps it was time to heal and move on. As news of Lily's appearance spread, it created a new wave of reflection in the Fayetteville community. People began to look at the case and those involved with more sympathetic eyes. They realized that in every tragedy, no one is entirely good or entirely bad, just complex people with difficult choices. The Baxter case, with all its dark secrets and tragic consequences, had become an inseparable part of Fayetteville's history.